Badass of the Week is an iHeartRadio podcast produced by High Five Content. It is approaching midnight on the evening of September 2nd, 2010. Deep in the jungles of Bengal, India, the locomotive of the Maurya Express unexpectedly grinds to a halt. With a crash, doors and windows burst open, and in storm a crew of bandits, weapons at the ready. There are dozens of them, carrying an array of swords, pistols, and knives. The terrified patrons put up their hands. They can only watch as these thieves ransack their valuables. But one of the people on the train tonight is Bishnu Shrestha. He isn't just any patron. He's a veteran of the 8th Gurkha Rifles, one of the most elite combat regiments on Earth. And he's carrying his kukri knife. Bishnu is armed, extremely dangerous. And now those 40 bandits are trapped on a train with him. Hello, and welcome back to Badass of the Week. My name is Ben Thompson, and I am here with my co-host, Dr. Pat Larish. Pat, it's been a while since the last time we recorded.
Yeah. You've been in Brazil. And
yes.
That was great, I'm sure. And
yeah, it was awesome. I was spending time with in-laws. I had a really good time there. It was a little bit of an adventure getting home. We had that bonus episode last week, but it does feel kind of nice to be back in the friendly confines of this closet where I record with all of my gear and equipment. I don't know if I told you, but I forgot to pack my power cable for my laptop when I went to Brazil. I was there in December. And so I thought I could maybe buy another power cable while I was in Brazil, but it didn't work out because the voltage there is different. And if I bought a power adapter, it was going to kind of blow out my battery on my computer. So my mother-in-law was very nice to let me use her computer, but it was all in Portuguese and the keyboard's different. So it's got different keys on it. And so it was a bit of a, process to adapt to that. And so it feels very good to be back in my home closet studio recording again.
Familiar keyboard, familiar adapters, or you don't even need an adapter.
Right. I have my software. I have all of my stuff. Yeah. Everything works the way it's supposed to. It's great. I'm feels very good to be home again.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We are going to do a really fun episode today. We're going to talk about something that is very near and dear to my heart. It's a warrior culture that I follow very closely. I have probably a dozen books on these guys. And anytime any news article comes up about the Gurkhas of Nepal, I get a lot of email from people of being like, dude, this is another cool Gurkha thing happened.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I want to talk about them. And I think the best way to preface a discussion of the Gurkhas is by saying that when Prince Harry of England, Meghan and Harry, like when Prince Harry, he served in the military. He was sent off to Helmand province in Afghanistan in 2008 as an officer. He wasn't an officer of the Gurkhas, but they stationed him among Gurkha regiments. So he was kind of surrounded on all sides by Gurkhas. Well,
and I'm assuming this was not a completely random decision.
It was not. It was almost certainly calculated. And why do you suspect that is?
I don't know. Maybe the Gurkhas love celebrity gossip. I suspect that is not the. I mean, maybe some of them.
Maybe they hate celebrity gossip. It's more in their nature to not like celebrity gossip, which is great because then they don't. That's why maybe they could keep that secret that Harry was there.
That's true. Just like focused, discreet. Yeah.
And the Gurkhas are not the kind of people who are they're not the kind of soldiers who are gonna take a picture on their cell phone and make a TikTok video about it. So
I'm guessing it probably has to do with the fact that that is not just a reputation, but borne out by their actual performance.
By centuries of badassitude.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Badassitude is totally a word.
It is. Yeah, I think. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I guess, Pat, let's talk about them. Let's talk about the history of the Gurkhas before we kind of get into the specific Gurkha that we want to talk about today.
Yeah. Yeah. So general context for the Gurkhas and their badassitude. So going back to 1814. Now, I have to say the badassitude goes well before 1814, but 1814 is when the whole Gurkha / Great Britain thing kind of becomes a thing. So in 1814, the British East India Company is in, well, India, as you might guess from their name, and they're trying to become like a major mercantile behemoth or whatever. Trade's being disrupted. Who are these people disrupting the trade? Okay, it's the Gurkhas. It's the Gurkhas.
Yeah. The Gurkhas are raiding down from the mountains, the Himalayas, and they're raiding down and attacking some of these settlements on the northern part of India and causing some trouble.
Yeah. So the British East India Company is thinking, okay, there's this huge mountain empire. They're big enough to cause us problems. They're not sure what's going on. These are raids from the hill tribes of Nepal, the Gurkha kingdom. There's a war from 1814 to 1816. And from the British point of view, these attacks are huge. And the British thought they had a big problem. And they did. It's not quite what they thought it was. They thought they were going up against a huge army, like numerically huge. But actually, the Gurkhas aren't that big in number, but they're big in, honestly, badassitude. They're fighting them so hard. They're on their home turf, they're motivated, and also they're just really, really good at fighting and being in this mountain territory. And it takes 2 years for this to be resolved. Each of them is fighting harder than they should, quote unquote, Yeah.
The British, they're like, we got to deal. I don't know what this mysterious Gurkha empire is or Gurkha kingdom in the mountains here, but they're causing a ton of problems. And then they start to attack and they're like, oh, these guys are fighting us really hard. Yeah, it's what you said. They thought that there was more of them than there were because they were fighting so hard. And there's a 2-year war between the East India Company and the Gurkhas.
Yeah. So, the cliche, if you can't beat them, join them, or maybe an updated version is if you can't beat them, try to recruit them to work for you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what happens. They say, the British, they never conquer the Gurkha kingdom. They don't take Nepal. They make a deal with them. Hey, stop raiding our commerce and we'll hire you guys to fight for us because clearly this is a thing that you guys are good at and we want you on our side.
Yeah. So the terms that the British East India Company and later the British Army offer are, good enough, lucrative enough that a lot of these Nepalese guys think, okay, yeah, this is a career opportunity for me. And so then we get the Gurkha rifles. And these are the best warriors of Nepal. The training is just crazy. You're on high altitudes. And, if you go up into a high altitude, like if you're from, say, one of the coasts and you're visiting Denver, you're like, you have to adjust,
Mm-hmm.
And this is the same country around Everest is. And I want to make it clear that the Gurkhas are not the same as the Sherpas. The term Sherpa refers to a very specific ethnic group. It's a tribe. Gurkhas refers to warriors.
Yeah, the soldiers of Nepal who specifically these guys who serve in this component, right? And they're the best. They're the toughest warriors of Nepal. And it's kind of what you said, where I am reminded of the Varangian Guard, which was medieval Vikings who left Scandinavia to go work as mercenaries and bodyguards in the Byzantine Empire, right? The Byzantines are all stabbing each other in the back. And so the emperor of Byzantium was like, I want Vikings. These guys are badass. They're tough as hell. Like, I want them on my side. I want to pay these guys pretty well so that they don't betray me. And so the emperors of Constantinople, at a certain point, they start having Vikings as bodyguards. And for the Vikings, it was a great deal because the Vikings are getting paid awesome. they're getting to hang out in Constantinople. They're getting, and then they make a bunch of money. They come home. They have all these fancy clothes. They have all this great gear. They have gold stuff and money and all. And so it was a great deal if you were a Viking to join the Varangian Guard, because it was like, it paid better than anything else you could do. So, but by extension, the Varangian Guard then became the toughest warriors of the Vikings, because it was so competitive, because everybody wanted that job and they worked so hard to get it. And there's only a certain number of slots available, so they just take all the best guys. The Gurkhas is like that as well. So the British Army was paying these guys really, really well and giving them harder missions than the Varangian Guard had. They're putting them into combat in very difficult situations. So it was dangerous. Yeah. But for what the British Empire was paying these soldiers, it was life-changing, not just for the soldier, but for his entire family, right? He would never have to worry about his mom, dad, brothers, sisters, wife, kids. Like, everything was going to be taken care of if he could get this job. And what that ends up creating is this culture where, pressure, but everybody wants this job. And so the Gurkhas become, they are the toughest warriors in Nepal. The toughest human beings in Nepal end up we're trying to get this job. There's a story about this where, there's this great warrior culture in Nepal, and there's this mountain there that is for warriors. And at a certain point, in the earlier days, people who failed out of the training, right? And the training is crazy. Like, think about all of the toughest special forces training in the world. It's on par with that. And they're doing it literally in the Himalayas. Yeah.
So you've got all that. And presumably you have to be at least a certain level of badass to even start the training.
To even consider it, right? To even think that this is a job you would want to do. You have to, it takes a lot of guts. But there was this problem where, like, guys who didn't get in would throw themselves off of this warrior's mountain. And so they literally had to build a net, like put a net out to catch these guys so that they wouldn't kill themselves. Like, that's the level of pressure, the level of training, and that's the type of people that we're talking about here.
Yeah. So they had to put in a literal safety net.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah. Okay. So the folks who did make it through the training,
they're the best. They were the toughest. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're working for the Brits. And what do? The Gurkha troops fight with the British against the Sikhs in Burma. That's modern-day Myanmar. 3 wars against the Afghans. They aided Britain in the 1857 Indian Mutiny, which you may remember from our episode about the Rani of Jhansi, Rani Lakshmibai. They traveled to Cyprus. They served in the Boxer Rebellion in China. They served in Malta. In World War I, they were at Gallipoli. So I feel like that's a shout out to Ataturk.
They were going against Ataturk, but they were successful, though. Like, they performed as well or better than any other troops during that campaign. They were they climbed that mountain that they were supposed to climb. They secured their beachhead at Gallipoli, which was not an easy task.
Yeah. They took Baghdad from the Turks. In World War II, they fought in North Africa at Monte Cassino. Shout out to Wojtek.
This is like a badass bingo here. The Gurkhas are.
It is. Yeah.
The Gurkhas are involved in all of our badass stories here.
Yeah. They were involved in stuff all across Europe. They were even stationed against the Japanese in Southeast Asia and India. So the thing is, after a certain point, India becomes independent, which is a story in its own right.
Probably one we'll cover at some point.
Yeah. Now, what's going to happen to the Gurkha rifles? Are they going to go with India? Are they going to go with Britain? What would you do, Ben?
I think they fought over it. I think both of them were like, "Here, they're coming with us."
Yeah.
Like, I think the Indian army was like, "No, we're independent. These are our guys," and the Brits were like, "Hell no, these are our guys. We want these dudes."
Okay, so what do you do if you have like a bunch of 7-year-olds fighting over cake or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
You divide it up. You share.
The King Solomon.
Well, okay. Yeah. So some of the Gurkhas go to the Brits and some of the Gurkhas go to the Indians. Like they divide them up. They divvy them up. And I'm talking about human beings, but okay, yeah, maybe there was a draft. I don't know.
Yeah, like half the regiments go to one side, half the battalions go to the other side, right?
So there are some Gurkhas who are British Army Gurkhas, and there are some Gurkhas who are Indian Army Gurkhas. And yeah, so some Gurkhas and former Gurkha soldiers, they serve as counterterrorism police in special forces in Brunei and Singapore. There's all sorts of...
They're in high demand, right? They are, they're members of these armies, but they also, like, even after you retire, there's jobs for you as like elite special forces in various countries that could use guys like this, right?
Yeah. You have skills, you know how to use them.
Yes. There are a lot of really great stories about them. I get a lot of emails because I was writing about them on the website, and I'd get emails from guys who were in the British Army who had kind of served alongside them. And the general vibe of these guys is they're a little on the shorter side. They have these cool hats that they wear. They have this knife that they carry. It's called a kukri. We're going to talk about it in a little bit, but they have this curved knife that they carry. It's kind of unique because the knife is curved. Think like it's like a foot and a half long. Think like the shape is almost like a scimitar kind of shape, like a cavalry saber, except the blade, the cutting part is on the inside instead of on the outside, as you'd see with a cavalry sword.
Oh, okay. So yeah, you have to go like swoosh.
Yeah. Apparently, the legend is that when you're learning to be a Gurkha, they teach you some unblockable attack with this weapon that nobody can stop. And that's some Gurkha secret. But the stories about these guys are great. And so, a lot of these British Army guys will be like, yeah, we'll be out, we're out at the pub, and these guys, they go and they sit by themselves and they don't laugh and they don't talk and they drink. And he's like, the scariest thing you could see is like one of these guys smiling at you. You're like, uh-oh.
Oh, okay.
That's the general vibe of them.
Okay.
They have an elephant polo team. The Gurkhas have an elephant polo team. Isn't that weird?
I mean, weird. I mean, maybe not weird if you live in the world of, say, King Naresuan of Thailand, whom we talked about in a previous episode, the elephant duel guy.
The Thai elephant polo team is supposed to be very good. They're supposed to be good competition for the Gurkha Rifles polo team.
I bet.
There's a great quote from a British writer who was trying to play it once, and he said it was like trying to play one-handed golf sitting on top of a double-decker bus with a punctured tire and a deaf driver. That's his description of learning elephant polo.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, it is what it sounds like. You sit on top of an elephant, and you have a big polo stick, and you try to not get in the other person's goal.
Yeah.
The stories about the Gurkhas are great, and that's where a lot of the legends of these guys come from, is the stories about them. And every book that you can get about these guys is littered with these awesome stories of them being badass. I think my personal favorite comes from the Falkland Islands War in 1982, when the British went down to fight against Argentina over the Falkland Islands. And there's this story of the Gurkha rifles have generally had Nepalese soldiers and non-commissioned officers and British officers. That's kind of how it's been, and that's how the British Army does their colonialism, generally speaking. So we're on the back of a transport airplane, and there's a British officer there, and all of these Gurkhas are there. They've got their like cool green berets on, their faces are all painted, they got their knives, they got their guns, they're ready to go. And the British officer is talking to the senior sergeant of the Gurkhas. And he's like, okay, here's the plan. We are going to come in. We're going to deploy by airplane behind Argentinian lines and attack them from behind their trench structure. So here's the deal. We're going to come in. We're going to come in pretty low. We're going to come in at 10,000 feet and we're going to deploy at night. And then we're going to attack the enemy. And the Gurkha sergeant says, no. 10,000 is too high. We need it to be 2,000 feet. And the British officer is like, 2,000 feet? Are you crazy? Like 2,000 feet is so low. 10,000 feet's under the radar. It's fine. 2,000 feet it's so low that your parachutes won't have time to open. And the Gurkha sergeant says, oh, we have parachutes? 10,000's fine. I just love that story.
Okay, I just want to make clear. So the Gurkhas, like,
We're prepared to deploy via airplane at 2,000 feet altitude with no parachutes.
Without parachutes. And they were game.
They were in,
wow.
yeah, not at 10,000 feet.
Wow.
Not enough of us will survive to take this position.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, there was one of the guys, one of these former British officers, Field Marshal Sam Mankinshaw. He's a famous British officer of Gurkha Rifles. He once said that, quote, "If a man says he is not afraid of dying, he is either lying or he is a Gurkha."
Apparently, yeah.
Yeah. And so this is the answer to the question. This is why Prince Harry was stationed surrounded by Gurkhas when he was doing foot patrols in Helmand province in Afghanistan in 2008. The Afghans, did not like the Gurkhas. They were afraid of them. They said they had all of these stories about, they were, they eat captured soldiers alive, and the Gurkhas for real would get in trouble for beheading dead enemy soldiers. And so the Taliban were like, no, I don't want anything to do with these guys. They're crazy. And the Gurkhas, of course, did nothing to dissuade them of this notion. They were.
Oh yeah, it's a useful reputation.
Yeah, absolutely. There was one guy in Helmand province in 2008 named Diprasad Pun, and he was on solo guard duty, and he got attacked by 30 Taliban. And 30. 30. Yeah, and it was just him.
Uh-huh.
And they say that he used 400 bullets, 17 grenades, a remote detonated mine, drove most of them away. One guy climbed up onto the rooftop with him, and he killed that guy with his machine gun tripod. That's
not the machine gun, but the tripod.
The tripod he was out of bullets, so he just threw the tripod at the guy and knocked him off the roof, and he died.
Cool. Okay.
So that's Gurkhas. Yeah. That's the story of them, and that's the kind of guys we're talking about. And we are going to tell a really exciting story about one of them after this break. Bishnu Shrestha wasn't looking for a fight on the evening of September 2nd, 2010. He was on an express train roaring through the darkness and the jungles of West Bengal. He was a soldier from the Indian Army. He just retired. He was 35 years old. He was on his way home. He had been in the 7th Battalion of the 8th Gurkha Infantry for the Indian Army. We had talked about there being British Army Gurkhas and Indian Army Gurkhas. He was on the Indian side, and he had reached, over the course of his career, he had reached the rank of Naik, which is a corporal. And the 7th Battalion, 8th Gurkhas is a famous regiment. They served all around the world. They fought in World War II. The quote I gave about if a man says he's not afraid of dying, he's a Gurkha, that officer was the commander of this unit.
Okay, yeah.
Shrestha's own father served with them during Vietnam. And we don't know the full details of Bishnu Shrestha's career, but it is possible that he was in Afghanistan and Iraq. The Gurkhas were there around this time, but we don't know for sure his military history. He has retired from the Gurkha Rifles. He is on this train. He's in West Bengal. He's on his way home to Nepal. He's on his way back to his hometown to try to
expecting to get a bit of breathing space.
Yeah,
take a little break.
Yeah, he's a hardened veteran of war, but he's ready for a new life. And he's riding on the Maurya Express, which is a famous train line named after Chandragupta Maurya, who we haven't talked about yet, but keeps coming up as we're going through.
Yeah,
we talked about him, I think, with the elephant armies in the elephant.
We did, yeah, and we could totally say more about him, but let's not go down that rabbit hole because we're on a train in 2010 with Bishnu Shrestha,
and I think we might cover him at some point in the future because he's pretty cool. So. It's late at night. The train's moving. Bishnu Shrestha he's sleeping. He's sleeping on the train. He's wearing kind of calm, he's not wearing his uniform. He's wearing sleeping clothes to sleep in, to be comfortable on the train. And the locomotive, suddenly there's a sound, and the locomotive comes screeching to a halt. Middle of the night, the jungle. Passengers are kind of looking around like, what's going on? And then suddenly some doors open. And guys come in. These are armed men, middle of the night. They have pistols and swords and knives. and they're screaming and yelling. And this is a train robbery. It is a train robbery in the jungles of India in 2010, which you would think maybe train robberies don't still happen, but they do.
Apparently they do.
They do on the Moria Express in 2010. Some of these guys were on the train, so that's part of why it got stopped. So some people are standing up, and there's a lot of screaming, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of confusion.
Yeah, I'd be scared if I were on that train.
Absolutely. It was super scary, right? And so these guys have guns, knives, clubs, swords. They're robbing a train with a sword, which I think is interesting.
What?
Yeah.
Wait. People are robbing trains with swords in 2010?
Yeah.
Okay.
They got a sword. The guy sitting in the train doesn't have a sword. It's effective.
Yeah.
If somebody tried to mug me with a sword, I'd probably give him my wallet.
Yeah.
And so these guys, there's a lot of them. Like, it's not Jesse James's gang of 10 guys, right? There's dozens of them. Estimates are somewhere between 30 and 40 criminals, like bandits, on this train, moving up and down the aisles, and they start going fast, right? The hostages, or the people on the train, they're hostages now. They're feeling
effectively, got
their hands up. These guys are going down the aisles. Give me your wallet, give me your cell phone, give me jewelry, give me this, give me this. They got these big bags, these big duffel bags, and they're just throwing laptops, cell phones, jewelry, money, all this stuff. They're robbing all of these people who probably don't have a lot to give up anyway, but this is bad news.
Yeah. Whoa.
So Bishnu Shrestha, he's on this train, and they're robbing everybody. And, what's he going to do? There's 30 of these guys, 30 to 40 of them. And,
the odds are not good.
Yeah, the odds are not good. And this sucks, right? But all right, whatever. They come by, they ask him for his wallet. He's like, hey, I'm an officer, or I'm a soldier in the Indian Army. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really seem to make much of a difference. He still has to give him his wallet. But he's just like, all right, whatever, right? You guys take the money. It's not worth dying for. Okay, so these guys go up and down. There's multiple train cars, and he's in one of these train cars, and they're going up and down. And some of these guys, they take all the money that they're going to get, but that's not it. They're not done. They're bad dudes, and they decide they're going to start roughing up the people on this train, and they start hitting people and pulling people down, and maybe they're hiding valuables, or maybe they're just enjoying like power tripping on this stuff.
Yeah. Ugh.
And in the row with Bishnu, he's sitting on a train car row with this family, a mom, a dad, and this 18-year-old woman, and they start roughing them up, right? And they grab this girl, and they're being rough with her, and she looks over at Bishnu Shrestha, who is not wearing his uniform, but he has already identified himself as a soldier in the Indian Army. Yeah,
he's declared, yeah.
And Bishnu Shrestha is looking around, and there's all these guys on the train with him. And there's, there weren't 40 guys in his train car, but there were some guys in his train car with him. And they're getting rough. And she looks at him, she says, "You are a soldier of our people. Help a sister." And it turns out that he didn't give up everything to the criminals. He kept that kukri knife that I was talking about.
Oh, the kukri knife.
He's got it hidden under his chair. And as she says that, he realizes, maybe I should do something.
Yeah. Now, the thing is, so he's totally into helping people and saving people and, helping a sister. But the thing is, numerically, he's one guy.
There is a story from the Second World War. During some fighting in Burma against the Japanese, there was a soldier named Lachiman Gurung. He was at a forward position in Burma, in Myanmar, fighting against the Japanese. And he was in a trench, and the Japanese had killed everybody that was in his unit, and they started throwing grenades at him. He was throwing the grenades back as quickly as they were landing in his trench. But at one point, one of them blows up and severely blows up his right arm, his main hand in his arm.
Ouch.
It's useless.
So he's using his off arm.
Using his left hand, yeah. And he's in this trench. He's by himself. It is estimated that there's somewhere between 100 and 200 Japanese trying to kill him.
That's several orders of magnitude more than one, which is his number.
And so now he's got one hand. He's got his rifle. He's got some grenades. He's facing 100 Japanese. And he pulls his kukri knife and jams it into the ground in front of him and draws a line. and he says, "No one will pass here today. Now come and fight a Gurkha."
Oh.
And that's what these bandits are about to encounter after this break. So welcome back. We are on the Moria Express in the middle of the night in the jungles of Bengal. There are somewhere between 30 and 40 bandits on a train, which they have forced to a stop. They have robbed everybody on the train and now are going up and down the train car, beating people up and just adding injury to insult. They go after this one family, and the youngest member of the family, this 18-year-old woman, she is kind of being hit by these bandits, and she looks over at Bishnu Shrestha of the 8th Gurkha Rifles, and she says, "You are a soldier of our people. Help a sister." And Bishnu Shrestha decides, yeah, that sounds like something I want to do.
He's going to help a sister.
He's going to help a sister. He reaches under his seat. He pulls the Gurkha knife. He would give them his wallet. He would give them any valuables they want. But that Gurkha knife, that's a symbol of his unit. That's a symbol of that military tradition that we have been talking about forever.
Yeah, this kukri knife, it's got the special shape. He's got the special techniques to use with it.
He's got the unblockable attack.
Yeah.
This is the symbol of the Gurkha. This is a thing that they have that nobody else has. I think of the bolo knife and the Harlem Hellfighters. This is a thing that is symbolic. The Gurkha knife is on the logo of the 8th Gurkha Rifles. It's crossed kukris with a skull, right? That is the logo of that unit, and that is Bishnu Shrestha. So he jumps to his feet, he pulls the kukri, he jumps and he lunges at the guy who was grabbing this woman and hits that bandit so hard that we know the bandit ended up in the hospital. We're not sure if he lived or died. Severely wounds this guy, and now it's on. The terrorists on the train, the bandits on the train, they're immediately aware that like somebody on this train is doing the Steven Seagal Under Siege, the Chuck Norris Delta Force, the Wesley Snipes Passenger 57. We got a problem on the train. We got a hero. We got John McClane in Die Hard here, and
he's badassing all over the place.
He's badassing all over the place. He's vigilante justice. So these guys start attacking him, and he goes after them. He's fighting. He's wounding these guys. He hospitalizes 3 of them. Maybe lived, maybe died. We don't know the details, but he's getting jumped by a bunch of guys, and he hospitalizes 3 of them. He wounds a couple other ones. And at some point during the fight, he is slashed pretty severely on his hand.
Ooh. And now he's just one guy.
He's just one guy, and he's fighting. I don't know how many are on his particular train car. There were 40 guys on the full train together, but it had to have been a pretty decent number of guys all kind of trying to jump him at the same time, which is something you see in the movies a lot, but is not like an easy thing to fight off in real life.
No, but he's fending them off.
He's fending them off. He hospitalizes 3 guys. He wounds a couple others with his kukri. And then he takes a big hit in his hand and is slashed and is pretty messed up. He's pretty severely wounded by the attack. But the bandits, they got a problem, right? So like they were here kind of laughing and joking and, kicking people and robbing them. Now they got 3 guys who have to get to the hospital or they're going to die. They got 3 guys bleeding out. Yeah. They are this mission.
So taking someone's wallet is not as big a deal as getting your guys to the hospital.
We got to get off this train. We got to get these guys some medical treatment. Like the job is starting to go sideways for them. And, and they bail. And by and eventually they are kind of tracked down that same night. Some of these guys start getting tracked down by the police who get involved. And, maybe these guys going to the hospital was part of them being discovered. There's some guys limping around with big giant duffel bags through the towns that they've gotten off the train at. And
the duffel bags are not containing gym clothes.
Right. And police track these guys down and find them. And they end up recovering 40 gold necklaces, 200 cell phones, 40 laptops, and roughly $10,000 in stolen cash.
And a partridge in a pear tree.
Yes. And
okay, so they got the haul.
They got the haul. They don't arrest all 40 guys, but a big portion of them end up going to jail. And those 3 other guys either died or ended up in the hospital.
Oof.
We're not sure. We definitely ended up in the hospital. We don't know the outcome, but as we will say, like, it's possible that they were killed from their wounds. Bishnu Shrestha, for kind of single-handedly attacking all of these guys, the fight is like, and so one thing that kind of gets lost in the story here is that the fight between him and these guys is not, it's not a 12-second scene in an action movie. These guys are fighting for minutes. So the story goes that the combat lasted roughly 20 minutes. He kept these guys at bay.
Wow. And that's a long time. Like, it's a long time if you're waiting for a bus that's delayed. It's an even longer time if you're fighting for your life and the safety of the people around you.
Yes. And so we don't know the full details of everything that happened on the train. I imagine some of that time was like them not wanting to charge him and him not wanting to charge them, and they're on one side of a door and he's on the other side of the door. I don't know the full details of all of it, but they say that he fought them off for quite some time, and then they drove them off, and that was it. Bishnu Shrestha and the 40 Thieves, right? And
this is legendary.
It's legendary, right? So he kind of becomes a national hero of India overnight, right? The way he describes the story is like, you know, people didn't recognize me in my own hometown in Nepal, which I don't think was very big. And now everybody in India knows me. His dad, who had fought in Vietnam for the 8th Gurkhas, like, he was very proud and very happy. Bishnu Shrestha, he becomes this hero in India in 2010. The Gurkha rifles, his unit, the 8th Gurkhas, they temporarily, they're like, actually, you're not retired anymore. They unretired him. He was on the train home from his retirement.
How do you unretire someone?
Well, they unretired him so that they could promote him 2 levels and award him 2 medals for heroism for the Gurkha rifles. Then they re-retired him so that now his pension is the pension of a person who was 2 ranks higher than he was when he retired, which is great.
Yeah.
They gave him a silver-plated kukri knife, which I haven't seen a picture of this. I don't know what it looks like. I know that when you beat GoldenEye for the Nintendo 64, you unlock the silver PP7, which is like one of the really good guns in that game.
I kind of wonder what silver plating does for like the effectiveness of a kukri knife. I mean, I'm hoping for his sake situations don't come up where he has to use it, but like, does the silver like actually add to its effectiveness, or is it just pretty? Is it ceremonial?
It's pretty, and it is, silver weapons are effective against vampires and werewolves and other types of undead. So it's possible. That's what's going on here. His old unit gives him a cash bonus of 50,000 rupees, which sounds like a lot of money. I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah. I guess with exchange rate, it's like $500, but it depends on how far that goes, depending on where you are, you know, and what you want to spend it on. Like, that's a lot of guacamole if you like guacamole, you know.
I don't know that that's a delicacy in Nepal, though.
Yeah. But the takeaway is like people are recognizing him. Saying,
yeah, they're giving him money.
Awesome.
They're giving him awards. He wins these 2 Indian Army medals for bravery. The Indian government awards him a portion of the bounty that was out on the guys who were captured because they were like wanted criminals. And the Indian government offers Bishnu Shrestha discounted airfare and train fare in India for the rest of his life.
Okay, so instead of having to like rack up points, he's just like, yeah, I'm on a train.
Yeah,
I'm on a plane.
Permanent Delta Gold.
Yeah.
My thought is that like the Indian government thought that maybe like the best form of homeland security was to just make sure this guy was on as many trains or planes as possible.
I mean, you know, I understand where they're coming from. Yeah. Like if you're on a plane or a train or a bus or a whatever with Bishnu Shrestha,
it's entirely possible.
My guess is you'll probably feel a little more secure than you would otherwise.
Yes. So the official on his citations, the official recording of his deeds that night on the Maurya Express were that he killed 3 bandits and wounded 8 more. before he was wounded. And in the process, drove them from the train, saved the day. We know that nobody else on his train was like physically attacked or wounded. You know, he saved his people on his train car. In fact, the family that he helped, the woman and her parents, they offered him a reward of the US dollar equivalent of $6,500, $6,000. But Bishnu Shrestha, he never stopped by to collect it. He didn't need it. He didn't want it. He didn't want the money. He didn't want a reward for saving the day. He helped out a sister, and that was good enough for him.
He helped out a sister, yeah. Wow.
He's quoted in the Times of India saying, "Fighting the enemy in battle is my duty as a soldier. Taking on the thugs on the train was my duty as a human being."
Wow. So that's Bishnu Shrestha.
That's Bishnu Shrestha. And I want to end this by finishing that story of Lakshman Gurung that I talked about earlier.
Oh, yeah. You left us hanging.
Yes. Lakshman Gurung single-handedly fought off that Japanese attack. He survived. He won.
Wait, him against like
200 Japanese.
100 to 200 guys.
Yes. With one hand, firing his rifle with his offhand, throwing grenades back at them, yelling, being loud, come and fight a Gurkha. They couldn't handle it, and they left. Lakshman Gurung lived to be 91, older than 91, but there was a thing that happened in 2008 with the British government where they passed a law saying that retired Gurkha soldiers weren't allowed to emigrate and live in Britain. In the past, they had been. Former Gurkha soldiers who fought for Britain were able to come live in England. And in 2008, the British government passed a law saying that they couldn't. And the reason they gave in the law was that the Gurkhas had, quote, failed to demonstrate strong ties to Britain. Now, Lakshman Gurung showed up at the protest of this law. He was 91 years old. He was being pushed in a wheelchair. And he had a chest of medals that they had to install extra boards so that because the amount of medals was so much that it extended off the width of his chest. 2 rows that stuck off like 4 inches off the side of his chest.
I'm just like picturing the visual. He's got more medals than you expect people to have.
Picture like South American dictator who gives himself all kinds of awards and medals and things. Yeah, it's like that.
Yeah.
Dozens and dozens of medals. And he gets pushed out there.
So this guy shows up.
He shows up in his wheelchair, 91 years old. And he basically says, "Show me how I failed to demonstrate strong ties to Britain." And you know what they did?
What did they do?
They repealed the law.
They repealed the law.
That's Gurkhas. That's Bishnu Shrestha. That's badass.
That is totally badass.
That's the story we have for you today. I want to leave the door open to talking about more of these guys in the future. So we should call it here because this is going to be a subject that I would love to revisit again later. And yes, that's Bishnu Shrestha. That's the Gurkhas. Thank you guys, as always, so much for listening. Please do like and subscribe and follow our show and tweet us and add us and like us. And yes, stay badass. Thanks so much.
Badass of the Week is an iHeartRadio podcast produced by High Five Content. Executive producers are Andrew Jacobs, me, Pat Larish, and my co-host, Ben Thompson. Writing is by me and Ben. Story editing is by Ian Jacobs, Brandon Phibbs. Mixing and music and sound design is by Jude Brewer. Special thanks to Noel Brown at iHeart. Badass of the Week is based on the website badassoftheweek.com, where you can read all sorts of stories about other badasses. If you want to reach out with questions, ideas, you can email us at badasspodcast@badassoftheweek.com. If you like the podcast, subscribe, follow, listen, and tell your friends and your enemies if you want, as we'll be back next week with another one. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.